Donald Trump has been back on the campaign trail. He was in South Carolina yesterday talking to a rally, about 400 people in Somerville, his first event in that state since July. During a speech that lasted about 40 minutes, Trump talked about the 2016 presidential race and appeared to confuse his then opponent Jeb Bush with former President George W. Bush.
You know, the beauty was when I came here, everyone thought Bush was going to win. And then they took a poll and they found out Trump was up by about 50 points. Everyone said, what's going on right here? They thought Bush, because Bush supposedly was a military person. Great. You know what? He was a military. He got us into the Middle East. How did that work out, right?
So, Jonathan Lemire, he was talking, of course, about George W. Bush, but conflated him with Jeb Bush, who was the governor of Florida in March of 2003 when the United States went into Iraq. But for all the talk about Joe Biden's problems and his age and everything else, if you sit and watch not just those clips, but the 40 minutes in South Carolina, some red flags there.
I mean, Trump's right about the windmills and the whales. I don't know what you're talking about.
You're on board with that.
Yeah, fact check, true on that. No, you're right. It's a couple things here. First, there's a lot of discussion about President Biden's age and whether or not he seems to be, slipping at all, whether he's still up for the job. And there was a moment last week where eyebrows were raised. We're at a fundraiser the president had in New York City. He told the same story twice, seemingly not remembering that he had told it the first time. That said, President Biden has been able to do the job, and his record speaks for itself. His aides are very quick to point that out. I think we've been giving Donald Trump a pass too much because he's always sort of, frankly, spoken like a crazy person. And many times, if you read the transcripts of his speeches, they're very hard to follow. And he's so all over the place, it's tough to pin down what he actually means. But these red flags, these verbal missteps have only picked up in the last few weeks. And you're right. I mean, the windmills and whales things are nuts. The World War II not from reference last week. We had this one confusing the Bushes. The list goes on and on and on. And one does wonder, as much as polls suggest that voters don't care as much about Trump's age than Biden's, he is only 3 years younger than President Biden. And if Biden is going to be questioned about his fitness for the job, then voters should take the same look at Trump, who has been all over the place in recent weeks and seems to be, and his social media posts reflect this too, under increasing pressure and strain from all the criminal cases. And aides say that as well, that it is weighing on him much more than he'd like to portray.
Well, that's the real point here, I think, Joe, for all the whale thing was bizarre. He said the windmills are driving whales crazy, so they're washing themselves up on shore.
He's projecting again.
He's right.
He's projecting again.
But the point is, this is a man not only who is advancing in years, clearly, as you watch those performances, but he's got a lot on his mind having nothing to do with whales or Jeb Bush or Obama or World War II.
I mean, he's projecting. I mean, he usually projects himself only to people that he's running against. Now, he's going out and projecting himself on whales. So, yes, Donald, it's the whales who are crazy right now. There's the whales that are. But think about this. And it goes back to what we said yesterday, which is Joe Biden sitting there playing by Marcus of Queensberry rules and going, the GDP is going to rise by 2.49. I mean, that's how I talk, okay? But I'm not running for anything. He needs to do better, right?
Oh.
Right? He needs to start hitting Donald Trump back. There's a reason why those polls are looking the way they are, because they all talk about Biden being too old. Biden needs to start talking about Trump being too old. Listen, this is not hard to do. He doesn't have to wait for the writers to get off the picket lines to write his material, because everybody, this is what Donald Trump thinks and what he's thought over the last 2 weeks. That he ran a primary contest against George W. Bush in 2016. And he beat him even though George W. Bush had gotten us into the Middle East. And then he thinks, alternatively, that he ran the general election in 2016 against Barack Obama. And he said last week, nobody thought we could beat Barack Obama, but we did. He stumbled around with Obama's name. And then he went on to say he beat Barack Obama. He was going to beat, that he beat Barack Obama in 2020 as well. And then, of course, on to the part about where Joe Biden was going to get us into World War II in 2024. The reason why those numbers are higher and the reason why people are comparing Hunter Biden's laptop to stealing nuclear secrets is because the Republicans have been hammering Joe Biden over this nonstop, and the White House has considered itself above the fray. This is like Mike Dukakis in 1988 using his push lawnmower while George H.W. Bush was going around talking about how polluted Boston Harbor was and talking about, going from one flag factory to another flag factory. And John Meacham, by the time it was over, right, and you had Michael Dukakis go, I'm above this. I'm not going to respond to that. I mean, you've written 41's biography, By the time Dukakis finally started responding to those attacks, he had lost like 20 points in the poll. His 20-point lead was evaporated. And now you've got the Biden people sitting back talking Bidenomics while his son's being trashed and while his age is being trashed. And here you have, I just want to repeat for you because I know you're a historian. And I'm sure you never knew this. Donald Trump says he ran against George W. Bush in the primary and beat him. Ran in 2016, ran against Barack Obama in the general election. Nobody thought they could beat him, but he beat him. Ran against Barack Obama in 2020 and beat him, no matter what the press and the pundits say. This is a guy who is terribly confused. And again, we don't hear that so much because the Biden campaign is playing by Marcus of Queensberry rules.